Hello, and welcome to another episode of Fishing for Answers. Today, I am here with Harshal Mehta, the CISO at CWT or Carlson Wagonlit Travel. It's a pleasure to have you here today. Maybe introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Josh, for having me on the call. Yeah, I'm CISO at CWT. For people who don't know a lot about CWT, it's a corporate travel management company based out of Minneapolis, here in Minnesota. Been in the CISO role here for almost 7 years. Before this, I've been into consulting with the big fours, with forensic firms, traveled across the globe, worked in multiple geographies, and really excited to be part of the podcast today.
That's awesome. So, how did you get into cybersecurity to begin with? What? Because for a lot of us that have been in this for any time bit of time, cybersecurity wasn't always a thing.
Yeah, it's a great, I would say journey, but the initial trigger for the journey was definitely not planned. Obviously, doing my engineering in technology, I never wanted to do source code reviews and develop codes, which was so traditional back in 2000s, and really the newer masters which I had was on infosec, which really triggered me because I was so curious about the people aspect, the process aspect, and doing more of a leadership kind of a role and helping organizations. Security was not big at that time, and I just gave it a shot. And I really enjoyed the journey so far because you, even though you are part of the some organization tagged as a tech resource, but your role cuts across so many other business units. You talk to legal, you talk to compliance, you talk to HR, you touch across the real operations of the world. So it's really fascinating when you really see the human aspect of it and what difference you can do with cyber.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, along those lines, what from the social aspect of leadership, what are your sort of thoughts about just the need to be more outgoing or more extroverted, if you will, as a cybersecurity leader?
I think the first foremost is, a lot of people think us as tech resource, which is completely opposite to a cyber resource, wherein first thing I tell my team is you would not be able to succeed unless you know how we make money. That is the fundamental perspective of understanding how a business operates. How do we make money? That
Yeah.
helps us on prioritization of risk or any of the expenditure we are doing on cyber. But the
Yeah,
people
you don't
aspect
make
is
money off of cybersecurity.
yeah. But the people aspect is so prominent because that's where you connect with a kind of a human psychology on what is really troubling them. How are people reacting to it? I can give an example. During COVID, it was a complete 360 because everyone was stressed. People were sent back home. They were working from a remote ecosystem. They were worried about their loved ones, and in that environment phishing was so prominent. There were so many targeted attacks, replicating vaccines and Medicare and so on. So that's a time frame where you have to understand as a human what is really something which is close to your heart. What is something which can become, or you can become a victim replicating the real life scenarios. So I think that human aspect is pretty prominent on how cyber leaders or CISOs view, and that is a success factor because you can have the best tools, you can have the buzzwords, call it the EDR, the XDR, and everything from your cyber portfolio perspective. But if
Go.
the people are not trained well, if the people still click on phishing attacks, they still share passwords, um, yeah, it's not going to work.
Yeah, no, I love it, and I think there is a huge social element, a huge business element to being a CISO, and I think for a lot of people, at least for me, when I was even more junior and a penetration tester, I really saw it more from the technical side, which is interesting because I knew it was a human problem, but I still saw the whole thing more from the technical side of things. And it took me, go moving through my career to really understand just how much that was true and how much that social aspect mattered. And I know it's hard for a lot of people in cybersecurity because so many of us tend to be more introverted. You'd never know it about me, but my inclination is to be introverted. I just, beat that introvert constantly with a bat, and he, hides in a corner. But no, I do think that's just a huge element that doesn't get enough attention. And the other thing you said was understanding how the business makes money. I can't tell you how true that is because we're not in the business of, well, I am, but you're not in the business of cybersecurity, and so it really does change that dynamic. And I think it's, that's how you can help the business better balance. And I don't think we're there to get in the way. We're there to say, yeah, but
Uh,
yes, let's do this, but maybe we could take one step backwards and do it this way that's just a little bit more secure.
I think that's what the leadership or the board wants to get a view from the CISO or the cyber leadership is tell me if we do this, what are the consequences? But help me with a plan B. You are not going to get an investment of $50 million and protect everything. That's not doable. I think they want to understand the better risk because you said it right. You are here in a business to make money. You're not here to run a cyber business. So they have priorities to invest in other parts of the business and still be profitable.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I do think it's a balancing act. And one of the things that I've seen is that I fortunately, largely thanks to this podcast, but also thanks to just my position and my company, is that I get to talk to CIOs and CISOs of some of the largest companies in the world every day. And one thing that all of the most successful leaders have in common is that they understand that business case. They understand that their job is not to get in the way, that their job is to empower and help people do it just a little bit more security, that their job or securely, that their job is to communicate that risk. And so it definitely, I think a huge thing that really separates, some of the CISOs is, how much do they understand that business side? Because until you can understand why that CEO doesn't care about cybersecurity, you still will.
That's a different problem. If he doesn't care about security, that's a different problem. But yeah, yeah,
But I don't think it's that he doesn't care. When I say that, I make it as a joke, I guess, partially because I do carry the role CEO. But I like to make the joke that when I was a pen tester, I was really rigid. It was my way or the highway. This is my network, the whole God mentality that so many get. And not saying that I did. But then, when I became a CISO, I really did. It was largely because I learned to balance that business case a little bit more. Uh, but then when I became a CEO, I did truly realize that it's not that the CEO doesn't care about cybersecurity. It's that they have 10 things on their plate that are a higher priority and more critical, and they don't have time to think about security right then. And so maybe they're relying on their people to do their job and do it right. But I think that's one of the things that stood out to me is just the amount of pressure and the amount of balancing that top executives have to do. They've got limited bandwidth, and only so many things can get that priority each day.
I think that's the empowerment of the CISO and the technology leadership comes in is don't come every day for small problems. When you come in, there's a real problem, and that's where you get the right traction from the CEO or the board is when we come in and talk about an issue, it's a real issue. It's not that there are 10 low findings which are sitting in an internal web application which needs remediation efforts. So I think that's where the maturity and the leadership comes in is when you go to the leadership, you're going in with a thoughtful response on why do you need support on either financials or more resources.
A- Absolutely. Okay, so you've been at this a while. Are there any tips or just general observations about security awareness that you've found over the years? Like things that you've learned, maybe it's a tip, maybe it's just something that you've observed that you find interesting.
I think it's a great learning, great learning over the years, working with various organizations. Earlier in my career, and a lot of organizations use this approach, which is a carrot and stick is this is an awareness program. You got 30 days to execute the training. You do it. If you don't do it, we're going to do escalations. It's rigid, it's monotonous. It gets to a point where people do not really understand the real implications of not doing the awareness program. It's just checking the box for a lot of people, and at the end of the day, the effectiveness of that program really is not there. Over the years, what we really achieved and still ongoing is to change and make security as part of the culture of the organization. A lot of examples there. I think the first one, obviously, it has to be a top-down approach. You can't have
Sorry, did you say top down?
top-down approach.
Yeah.
It's not that the awareness program only needs to be done by junior staff, operation agents, technology staff. It has to be driven from the senior leadership. They have to set an example by doing this first in the process, showcasing why it's important. Number two is the training program in itself. We found that the content made a lot of impact to the organization. Over the time, every year, there is a genuine effort from my team to make the content real life. And I'm going to just make a tool suggestion. I'm not saying people should go and look at it, but we use Know Before. We use now Know
We
Before.
don't talk about that here.
Yeah, but the content which was there from a very traditional, um, you know, I would say presentation slide based to a real video made a lot of impact to the people. They could see why this is really important, connect with the awareness program. Another example which we did was linking this to their personal lives, which was really critical. A lot of people have young kids, they want to have a control on how social media, which is a big thing right now everywhere, on how social media should be controlled for young kids. How can we control so many connected devices in our home? That's another aspect which is so critical. We have everything connected, starting from our laptop all the way to the EV car. Those are the examples which help them to understand how an EV car can be controlled through a spam or a phishing attack, which can lead to a disaster. So I think those real-time examples connected them. There was another campaign which we did during holiday time frame or even tax seasons where people saw this could be real. A lot of the times people are like, oh yeah, that's a tax season, everyone's going to flood me with tax information, and we are going to be tax consultants, save your millions of dollars. But there are real scenarios where people get phished. Their bank account gets compromised, their social gets compromised. So I think those scenarios help them to be connected with us more regularly, rather than just doing, yeah, it's a 30-minute training, we have to do it, I have to go to the last space, acknowledge the completion of the training, and move on. They every year they looked forward to doing the training with the new content.
So I couldn't agree more that that what you do, the content is incredibly important. I talk about the often when I give speeches at like conferences, I'll talk about the three E's of security awareness. It has to be entertaining, it has to be effective, it has to be engaging, and just a little bit about how to do some of those things. So I couldn't agree more. I think that once and done training doesn't work. In fact, every single study coming out of academia
Sure.
about whether or not traditional security awareness training works finds it doesn't. In fact, there's a lot of studies that have even taken those, shorter micro content that so many people out there have that's still like 3 to 5 minutes long, and they found that even those aren't working. And so I do think how we look at it is critical, and that actually brings me to one of my, I don't know, soapboxes, if you will, that I love to get on all the time. But I hear a lot of talk about how you need more sales in cybersecurity, but I don't hear as much talk about how we need more marketing in cybersecurity. And to me, driving that culture change, getting that effective communication is really all a function more of a marketing type team than it is of a cybersecurity team. And I actually went to school. I was originally gonna go for programming because I was that nerd. I taught myself to program in high school, when I probably should have been playing football or something, but I was on a computer in the library. I admit it. But I had taught myself to code, and the colleges I was looking at had terrible, app software development programs. So, I'm trying to decide what to do. The dean of the marketing school finds me and somehow convinces me that I was gonna be in marketing, and next thing you know, I'm in marketing, I'm really glad that I went down that path because it taught me a lot of the psychology around how do we influence people's behavior and get them to change, and one of those tactics, that I've really hung on to over the years is called, spaced learning. And it just talks about how when we it's the foundation of advertising, but it talks about how when we break things down into tiny little bite-sized chunks and we feed it to people at a very high repetition, that we get really good results. And so if you look at like Coca-Cola and really all the brands, when you and I were younger and just getting into tech maybe, commercials were 30 to 60 seconds, but now you look at them and they're 10 to 30 seconds
Yeah.
max. And there's a reason that Coca-Cola is a global brand. There's a reason that all of these companies are global brands. They understand how to influence behavior. And so when I look at security awareness training, I really come at it from that we've got to do things at a much higher frequency, with much smaller touch points. And when we do, we can be in their inbox every single week of the year, training them about cybersecurity and not even eat up an hour of their time.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's a great point, and I think that's a continuation of, we have a awareness program which runs. Then we have snippets of, how do we engage, because you said three E's. I think the engagement part is pretty critical because
Engagement is huge. That's probably
yeah.
one of the most important.
The two E's which I really concentrate on is, one is the engagement piece and the other is the empathy piece, because those are critical. Because um, first, on the engagement piece, you don't want to engage them once in a year. You want them continually be engaged. How do we engage them constantly? We launched something called as Inside Man series, which is like a Netflix. They look at the videos, and kid me not, when we started this program, we were like, would people have time to go on and look at this 30 minutes, 5 episodes to understand security? Don't know. We started the journey. We are in season 5, and that's been a huge success because the next generation of the people understand and connect when something is being you know driven down through a messaging content, and they can get that more clearly rather than a paper based exercise. That's one. Empathy is critical as well. As I said, they are here to make money for us. I don't want them to be constantly taking awareness training every 2 weeks, and then we are bombarded, and then we see service level agreements which are dropped. How do we catch people who are good at it, and how do we catch people who are not good at it?
So you bring up a really good point. I think we focus way too much as an industry, not necessarily not talking about you. I think you understand and see the empathy side of this really well, where not always does that happen in every organization. And I think one of the things that that we really need to do a better job at is not just catch people when they're doing it wrong and tell them when they're doing it wrong, but also catch them when they're doing it right and tell them when they're doing it right. One of the things that we have and that I think makes it really effective is that we well, I'll go into that later, but we have the immediate follow-up with every single fish. So if they report a fish, and it's a simulation, they have the instant follow-up. If they report a fish and it's unknown, they still have instant follow-up, just telling them, "Hey, we've routed this to your IT team." And then as soon as you click fish in the back end, it's back in their inbox, praising them, calling them a cyber hero. And I think that that praise, those kudos, that taking every opportunity you get to tell somebody how good they're doing is more important than, helping them realize their mistake. Now, the
Correct.
mistake is equally as important. I think we make mistakes there too, because the second that mistake is realized, there's an emotional response, and that emotional response makes that user very prone to learning. And so, you can anchor that with really strong just-in-time training to really, get that better, those better results. Um,
Yeah.
so one of the I guess I haven't directly asked you the question. I'm sure I know the answer, but let's just directly ask it. Carrot or stick, if you could only use one, what do you go with?
I think, with if this was 3 years back, before COVID, something, I would have always gone with a stake and say, you fail three phishing attacks, you're out of the organization.
3 strikes and you're out.
I think that's changing because you have to understand the human aspect of it. Um, the sophistication of the phishing attacks is going more and more ahead. They are using significant newer technologies, and we can touch about deepfake anytime later. But those are the kind of attacks which are really sophisticated, and you cannot use a carrot approach to penalize a user who has been a great user who has always reported a phishing attack, and there's suddenly a sophisticated attack which he has clicked on, and you use a disciplinary process against him or her. So I think to to have a positive change
Why
in the
Oh, go ahead. Finish.
to have a positive change in the organization where cyber is embraced with open hearts. I feel the carrot is much better, mechanism, and it can depend on the verticals. For a very highly regulated organization, obviously the stick mechanism works well. But for someone like us, where we are trying to embrace the cultural change, where we want to bring people at the center of the cyber program. I feel carrot is much better approach.
I couldn't agree more. I'm a big carrot fan. I mean, but I've tried the stick. I think a lot of us have tried the stick in our career. I remember when at my very first security awareness company, my first idea was we're going to create scareware. And we're actually, because this was hackers trying to come up with security awareness, and so we write actual scareware that makes it seem like your computer is burning to the ground. And then has these pop-ups that you can't get rid of that are on top of everything, that say, "You just, did this," and they like, I understand," like 12 times. We had them click, no joke, "I understand," 12 times. Um, but it really helped me realize the stick doesn't work. It's not effective. There's still a lot of people, and like very influential people in this industry, that would still argue that the only thing they should be using is the stick. But I really feel that the old adage, "You catch more flies with honey than with vinegar," is true, particularly here, and that this is one of those aspects where we can do better by starting with why, and by helping them connect the dots. So you talked about how when you tell them, you make it personal, it gets better results. And I think it's the same principle as this study that I read that talked about how when we contextualize training to somebody's role, it makes it 15 times more effective. I think it's the exact same thing happening just in different ways. The difference between the training in both cases or both scenarios here that worked and didn't work was that in one case they're telling them why they're connecting it to their personal life. In this case, they're connecting it to their professional life, but it's still the exact same of making it personal, helping
Yeah,
it to be more real for them. So to that regard, what is your take on role-based training?
yeah, it's pretty critical, and I think I would say that's the journey which we have gone from. This is a training for 12,000, 15,000 employees in the organization, compared to this is the training for our frontline agents who see different type of attacks, compared to a tech guy who see a different kind of attacks. Their
Now,
maturity of identifying a threat is different, and their attack factor is also different. I would not be training a frontline agent on how to secure a privilege account. But that's pretty critical if I don't train my tech staff on it. And I can't have a generalized training which talks about privilege account, and the frontline would be like, what is this? So I think that is pretty critical to have row-based training attack. I would go one step ahead and even do row-based simulation attacks, because that's
yeah.
another aspect where a lot of organization, it's a good start to do simulation of phishing exercises.
Well, the bad guys are already doing it,
Yeah,
against us. We see
correct.
our staff get role-based training every day. I don't think anyone in this industry has not seen that at this point. So, no, I completely agree. I think that role-based training, part of that is phishing. But to me, I see phishing as part of that training as well. To me, yes, you get the added benefit of getting a better understanding of your risk. But it's all about training to me. If we're doing a pen test, sure, it's about testing security. But when I am running phishing for as a simulation as part of my security awareness training, it to me is all about helping them understand how urgency is used against them, helping them understand how authority is used against them. Because there's this behavioral science principle called identical elements, and it talks about how when you well, basically, when you learn about something really well, you'll see it everywhere. And that classic example is you buy a new car, you drive off the lot, you see that same car that you thought was unique at the very first light after you drove it off the lot.
Yeah,
That's identical elements theory in action. So, how do we apply that to cybersecurity? Well, when we make sure they understand how urgency is used against them really well, anytime they're being pressured, they're going to immediately default to this ultra suspect sort of mode where I don't trust it. And that's what we want. We want to take the body's natural built-in defense mechanism, our subconscious, which is, responsible for all of our instincts, making sure we block ourselves if something's coming at our face, and we train it on how to identify phishing attacks. And that to me is why we're doing simulations more than anything else.
correct. And I think those sophistication on phishing is also getting much better with a lot of chat GPT and AI based phishing attacks which are being targeted, where I remember in old days we used to say, hey, look out for spell errors, look out for urgency, look out for authority. I think that's changing a little bit over time, where they're getting more sophisticated on, they can simulate a senior employee without even creating authority. We were seeing a vishing attack or smishing attack where some of the executives were getting specific text messages, and they were very targeted without authority. If you can see their and it was all targeted through WhatsApp. A fake profile was created on WhatsApp with an executive's photo and everything. You would feel at a lower level, oh, that's a CEO trying to contact me for something. Bad luck, they were trying for Apple cards, which failed their execution. But we have seen real attacks where someone's trying to message and say, hey, you are selected for a jury duty. That's pretty common. You get jury duty messages without knowing who the sender is. You click on the link and boom, now you are entering into a portal, your social number, whatever, your personal details, and you don't even know the authenticity of these messages. So they're getting smarter.
Yeah, I got one the other day where they actually, that same jury duty one, and they spoofed the local sheriff's department phone number. So my phone says the sheriff's department's calling me. I pick it up and I actually do their security awareness training. So I call them up and I'm like, "Hey, I think somebody's impersonating you." They're like, "Yeah, we actually sent an alert about it yesterday. Do you check your email?" And I was like, "No, I don't." But uh, anyway, I mean, it really is. They're getting very sophisticated. You're 100% on. Like the advice we used to give is no longer accurate, because these large language models are allowing people that barely know the language to craft immaculate emails that are just phenomenal and very convincing and very compelling.
Yeah.
And that's the reason I think we have to train not on, oh, right click and go to the headers and look at this. No, trust your gut. Your
Zero
gut.
trust model. I think that's where we train them is you trust no one except yourself. If you get something which you don't trust, you're not expecting it, ignore it. If there's an urgency, that person is going to use another mechanism to call you up or send another email to follow up. But in that moment, again, that's where the human psychology, the human temperament comes so important. There's so much stuff happening. You're in between COVID, with the new virus, you're sick, you have so many emails, and then suddenly email comes in and you click on it.
Yeah,
So that's where you have to constantly train them on being aware every time.
yeah, you do. You really do. So AI has changed so much. I mean, the threat landscape from what it used to be to what it is right now, we're already talking about it. We've already hit on deep fakes and AI driven phishing, at least at some level. I know the AI driven phishing I see every day. What about you? I mean, how bad is it?
So we have seen, if we take in account all the accumulation of our phishing attacks, I can attribute 10 to 15% are now originating from AI. Those are sophisticated. Um, I think the messaging, the exchange tools are doing a great job on filtering some of those, but we still see significant emails going through the filter, hitting the emails. And this is where we leverage the human connection, the human culture, the human chain to identify a phishing. And then now we know there's a phishing attack which has been targeted, and now we have our signatures or our models trained to identify that through the human behavior. That's why the AI piece is getting to get more sophisticated. So you rely on your last chain, which is the human aspect. So that's on the phishing side. The email side, we are seeing significant, and I don't have the numbers for it, but targeted attack to our operations. So when I say operations, call center environment, getting automated calls through a machine model, which when I hear it, you would not be able to differentiate whether it's a human originated or it's a machine originated call. They are immaculate. Their accent is perfect. They have targeted information about the organization. And this is both for a technology organization as well as for our core operations. They know exactly what they're looking for. Their objective is to do.
Multimodal models are insane at what they can do. But we
Yeah.
actually built one, and it was easier than it ever should have been. But B, I was impressed at how good it was at pushing and coming up with new reasons because you give it the goal. You want to get this information, and if you can't get this information, go for this information. Which is a really cool thing about the AI is that, in the past it was like more like singular goals, but the AI can adapt and say, okay, well, this person's not going to give me their password. Let's see if I can get their username. And so it makes that testing much more dynamic. But from an offensive perspective, call centers have been well-known targets now for a decade as one of the top most targeted, places. They've been at the core of so many lawsuits. Like, I'm involved in one right now where, it had nothing to do with travel, but a big, telecommunications company, their call center got hacked. Essentially, I mean, when I say hacked, social engineered into doing something they shouldn't have, which led to a SIM swap, and, well, we all know what happens after the SIM swap, and so tons of money was stolen, and of course, the person suing, but I think that it's not surprising that we're seeing AI-driven attacks against call centers. Um, I'm curious, what are they going after? What's the goal? Because you probably are closer to this particular type of attack than most of us.
Yeah, I would say 9 out of 10 times they're looking for fraudulent bookings. They want to book in tickets which are with immediate travel. There are a lot of red flags which comes in is booking for guest travelers, not with a profile, booking with less than 12 hours of travel, booking for first class or business class. They are booking for specific regions targeted in Middle East, originating from some of the countries in Asia, which definitely raises a lot of red flag, or in Africa. So there are some, I would say, outliers which are easy to identify, but they could get sophisticated. They could book tomorrow a ticket from Phoenix to Chicago, and we would not identify because that's not in our SOP. But I think the biggest motive there is financial gain. Those are either through stolen credit card numbers or booking it on through cash. I don't know whether they are being used for um, anti-national or some of the other travel reasons, but the only thing which we know is book fraudulently or through fraudulent credit card numbers.
Okay. So it's probably some of these Carter networks, trying to cash in. I wouldn't be surprised. That's fascinating. I find the whole technology swing fascinating. To me, it feels like another dot-com, bubble. What do you think? I mean, does it feel like the wild, wild west of the dot-com boom again to you?
It is going to exponentially grow. Obviously, the resources which the bad guys or the threat actors have is significantly more than the budget of any of our organization, not just from cyber or even technology perspective. I think this is where the compensating controls, this is where the culture, this is where the SOP and the guardrails which you put in is going to be more effective going forward.
Agreed. And
um,
that low tech SOP is probably one of the most effective things we
it's
have.
most effective. People don't know our SOP. We change our SOP every month. You call me up like yesterday and say, oh yeah, I'll check for 1 2 3, and next month you call and it's like, that's not the SOP. I think you got the wrong information, and that's the first red flag. But we have to constantly be on the lookout. We have to learn and manually train our LLM models, even though we don't use LLM models there. But train our people, train constantly. Look out for new technologies. There are a lot of players who are innovating in that space where we can look out for spoof calls or even calls originating from IP addresses which are not legitimate. But it's going to be a way till we identify an automated solutions. We have to rely on more of manual processes and our SOPs in the meantime.
I think it's gonna stay that way. I know that there's all of these startups popping up around AI, deep fake detection, but I don't believe that that's ever gonna be effective. I think that at best it's a cat and mouse game. and that it will go from being moderately effective to almost ineffective at all, and swing wildly in different directions. Now that's just my prediction, but
And you have to also monitor the ROI of these tools. What
you
is the
do.
ROI? Yeah. So we all know about the deepfake in Hong Kong, which was such a big news. But how easy is that deepfake to be replicated in other organizations?
Really easy. They released a new tool last week that's
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's where we have to look at the ROI.
I agree, and I don't necessarily. I mean, I'm not dogging on those types of products. I just think that it's the low tech stuff that often has the most impact. Still to this day, I mean, start with hardening your systems. I can't tell you how many times as a consultant I've come into places and they've got all these expensive technologies, but their systems still aren't hardened. And so, that low tech, just simple, straightforward stuff is still one of the most effective.
Yeah,
And
we call it the hygiene. If you're not patching up or doing the basic hygiene, the most sophisticated tools are not going to help you.
agreed, you got to
But
start.
but that's a perception with a lot of cyber folks is it's like a person in a candy store where, hey, there's a new tool for deep fake, let's get it, but you're still not patching your base systems. So that's where would it be effective? Yeah, you're gonna predict and identify more sophisticated deepfake attacks, but you're gonna miss the very basic zero-day attacks, or even someone coming in through non-patched systems, which is very critical. And I think one of the most underrated success factors for a lot of CISOs is to get rid of tech depth, or have the basic hygiene before you invest in a very sophisticated tool.
I agree. I mean, I think that it's that there's just so much in cybersecurity that can be done through policy, through procedure, through system configurations, and all of those should be your first, or at least one of your first investments. And particularly, I really don't think deep fakes are going to be solved by technology. I think they're going to be solved by process, because they're
Correct.
gonna get so good that there's no way we're going to be able to differentiate, not even a machine. And so when that happens, the only way we discover that is by picking up the phone and calling that person, by jumping on a different call, but going to something that's out of band. And I think educating employees that, hey, Zoom can be deep faked, so that they don't just necessarily trust it. And if something seems off, they say something. But, well, we are running out of time here. We're actually at time here. Any final words of wisdom before we wrap up?
I would say, I think we touched a little bit on this, on the biggest E part, which is the empathy piece, which is very critical as a cyber leaders to um, make a change and embrace people to adopt cyber policies or procedures. One of the biggest thing which we keep on learning and I keep enforcing in my organization is, let's be those friendly cyber folks in the organizations rather than the ones who are stopping every initiative and putting guardrail. If people are not approaching you with problems, you're not going to identify those. You can have the best of the tools, you can have best of technologies, but if you don't know of an asset which is still in the ecosystem, which is not being plugged in, which is going to be not patched, those conversations would only come in if you talk to the people, if you empathize on the conversations by saying it's okay to identify a box, or it's okay to identify a suspicious behavior, and let's solve the problem, rather than de-intensifying them by reporting something which could harm their career path. And I
Yeah.
think that's where biggest change is happening, where people are upfront. They want to take a career in cyber because they can see how positively we can influence the organization, rather than the stick approach where, oh yeah, let's be scared, the cyber folks are on the call, let's just keep our mouth shut. So I think that's the golden piece which we keep on embracing every day, is the more we talk to people, the more insight we get, and it's always useful to get that insight into the environment.
Yeah, and you're gonna find vulnerabilities or issues in procedures or processes that you will never find with a scanner, just simply by having conversations. Those conversations can unearth so much, and I agree, open door is absolutely critical. Harshal, it's been an absolute pleasure having you, join us today. Don't hang up just yet, but for the audience, thank you and have a great day. We will